Hey y'all, it's Kobe R. Rice, and I am back again finally for another weekly creative update. Though, honestly, at this point, this is like a month and a halfly creative update. I actually came on here last week or the week before to give you guys an earlier update, but my equipment and my setup has been acting really screwy recently. Plus, I've just been pretty busy trying to basically close out the end of the semester. And yeah, so it's been about 6 weeks since I last saw you guys. I think the last update I gave you all was on October 12th. And that was with regard to the closing of the production that I was co-directing called Erased. And I also updated you guys last time with a quadrimesterly update that was also 6 weeks late. So I guess I'm sort of falling into a trend or something. I don't know. But that very last podcast I gave you guys was an overview and a sort of resume of everything that I've done and accomplished between May 1st all the way up to, I believe, August 31st. And so that was a 4 month period that covered the entirety of the summer, as well as covering the tail end of the spring semester and the head beginning of this fall semester. So we have a lot to catch up on. And although I don't have nearly as many classes or like responsibilities, so to speak, as I did in the previous semesters, that doesn't mean that other things are not happening. So, and excuse the energy, guys. This is sort of the last and final push for me personally in terms of the things that I have to do for the semester. And I'll get into what's going on in graduate school in just a second. But just to kind of give you guys an idea, I have a big project and a presentation due this Wednesday. And then pretty much after that, I have my portfolio review, which is going to be an update to the committees on my master's thesis progress. And then for the entire month of December, starting December 3rd, which is literally next Monday, I have to focus on doing my comp, which is a huge exam that you usually will find in PhD and doctoral programs at the end of your coursework, wherein you take the exam to sort of prove your dramaturgical knowledge and well, in this particular case, this is my dramaturgical knowledge. In other fields, you'd prove that you are indeed an expert in your chosen field of study and that you have a really good foundation in the things that you are interested in pursuing at the doctoral level. Same thing with the master's degree here. I thought I put this on silent. Sorry, guys. Same thing with the master's degree here. And even though this is I sort of have a semi issue slash attitude with the comp for this particular program because this is an MFA degree, and so I don't really know why we're taking a comp exam for an MFA. It should be focused mainly and mostly on producing a final sort of magnus opus, or at least the beginnings of a magnus opus that reflects our voice, reflects what we want to do in the field, etc., etc. And this kind of just, and sorry to rant for a little bit, this kind of just feels as though this is academia's and the ivory tower's last shot at trying to prove that it has a place in my life as an artist. So essentially, in that way, philosophically, metaphorically, and in actuality, I have to leap over that final obstacle and challenge in order to move on, get my degree, and do what I really want to do, which has literally nothing to do with what I'm studying here. Although what I'm studying here will contribute greatly to strengthening my skills in the areas that I want to pursue. So, having said that, for literally the next 5 weeks, I am going to be consumed with lots of graduate school stuff. But at the same time, I am definitely making room and finding room for my creative endeavors. So that's my little preamble, and we will jump right into it. So since we're already on the subject of graduate school, a lot of what I got done for the past 6 weeks has mainly just been about me wrapping up the semester. You know, me I graded, oh my goodness. And excuse me if I'm looking off the screen. As usual, I'm referring to my notes because I'm a nerd like that. Let's see. So there were 4 major papers and tests that we had to grade in the past 6 weeks for like about 200 students. So you can imagine that was a lot of work. So a lot of that was really about not only keeping up with the current work, but also catching up. And that's another thing I want to sort of express to you guys for this podcast, since it is covering, not even October 12th, but October 8th, all the way up until yesterday. Because I had been on the production for Erased, directing and dramaturging that production, some of my work fell behind, including my teaching work and my coursework. So for the past 6 weeks, in addition to moving forward and staying on top of new work, I've been catching up with all the old work that was getting lost while I was putting all my focus into directing. So a lot of that really defined the past month and a half that I've been, kind of running around crazy in graduate school. Continued to meet with students, etc. And I actually turned a corner in my experimental dramaturgy class, because when I first got into the class, I didn't really understand what I was supposed to be learning per se, because the material was new, and also the way we started for that particular class, it started off very steeped in a classical dramaturgical sort of in classical dramaturgical materials, but I sort of quickly realized, what we were supposed to be gaining every single week. And that's not to say it's not a bad class. I'm not trying to actually hit on the class. I'm actually trying to give the class props. But because experimental dramaturgy and experimental theater is relatively new territory for me, the first thing I try to do when I'm in a new space is figure out what the space looks like, what the rules are, but then also what is here in this space that I can use and that I can mine personally for what it is I want to do. And I ended up, because now we're at the end of the class and we're not having any more substantive lectures or seminars that we have to teach. It's really just us presenting on our work, because we are putting together an experimental dramaturgy protocol. And what I've learned from like the past 14 weeks is basically I've developed a lot of really interesting lenses through which I can look at story, at structure, at production design, at dramaturgy, from a very particular experimental perspective, as opposed to using a new play development perspective or a classical development perspective. Developing lenses, definitely gaining a lot of tools. We learned about Brechtian dramaturgy, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around actually, but that's because I missed that class. Unfortunately, I was sick. But we learned about Brechtian dramaturgy, Formanesque dramaturgy, the dramaturgy of Reza Abdo, looking at the theater of the real and documentary dramaturgy and documentary theater. We looked at Fuchsian dramaturgy. We looked at a Barbin dramaturgy, looking at 3 different kinds of ways you can approach the dramaturgical process of a piece. I think one is rhythmic or musical, another is narrative, and the other is, I forget what the last one is. I have to look back into that. But it's a really amazing perspective through which you can look at story or the lack thereof, and look at the elements of the stage and the elements of theater, and figure out how to use these elements to develop a piece. We learned basically how to create beat diagrams, which really open up a play, especially experimental plays, in a different direction for you as a dramaturg and for you as a director. We looked at developing pre-shows and post-shows, writing up readers' reports, and we learned about creating countertexts, which is really excellent and interesting. Again, we delved back a little bit into classical dramaturgical styles, which included using a lot of Ball's, I think his name is David Ball or Howard Ball, I think it's David Ball's backwards and forwards manual for basically breaking down and understanding a play, which I highly recommend just generally. Like, even if you're not writing plays or a dramaturg, if you are a filmmaker, especially if you're a filmmaker actually, because his process of looking at story and narrative, I think is especially applicable to the expedience with which filmmakers and screenwriters try to execute their work. So he looks at a bunch of those different things, and we used his different methods, triggers and heaps, and the way that he diagrams drama to further kind of like build our tool sets and our toolboxes. What else did we do? Man, we did a lot. We wrote a couple of reflective papers as well. Those didn't really serve me so well, but they did help me to think a little bit more about how to apply dramaturgical skills to other fields. And it helped me to sort of, I guess, sum up at those points in time what I was thinking about the class and the material we were reading. The reason why I don't like an analytical papers and theoretical papers is not because they're not useful, but they're not really useful to me. Like the way that my mind works is sort of consistently analytical, and I have a very particular way of processing my information and my material. So, when people try to give me their way of analyzing a piece of work or like summarizing a piece of work, sometimes it's helpful, other times it's not, depending on whether or not I've thought in that direction already. Anyway, but we learned a lot of skills, gained a lot of lenses, and gained a lot of tools. And so the final project for this class, which for me is due this coming Wednesday, which is why this is going to be a quicker podcast than usual, is that I am developing an experimental dramaturgical protocol for a play written by Susan Laurie Parks called Father Comes Home from the Wars, parts 1, 2, and 3. And I can't say, I don't know, for me, what I'm finding in this program, and it's not because of this program, but this is just me in general, I tend to be much more excited about dramaturgical projects in theory than I am in practice. So in theory, I'm super excited to put together all the elements of an experimental dramaturgy protocol for this amazing play. In practice, it's not very thrilling for me. It's not something I'm drawn to or like I crave or that I'm hungry to do. And so that's something that I've learned about myself, especially coming to the end of this graduate school process, because this is like my final core class with my entire cohort, which I think is significant. But what I've learned about myself is that again, this is a field that has taught me a lot of skills and a lot of really helpful perspectives, and has just been like great in a lot of other ways in other parts of my life. But it's not really something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I'm good at, but I'm not passionate about. And even now, all of my mentors and teachers are really encouraging me to make dramaturgy a full-time thing that I'm seriously considering pursuing, because they really believe in my talent and my skills. I don't even know if it's really a talent. I don't like calling it that, but like they enjoy my level of like work and commitment, and they think I bring a lot to the field. And I really do appreciate that, that support and that belief. But at core, it's just not something I'm really interested in, and I might be getting a day job as a dramaturg somewhere, but if I had to choose between a day job for dramaturgy and like, for example, like an admin assistant job, I'd probably choose the admin assistant job. Not because dramaturgy is that bad, but because dramaturgy takes a lot of spiritual, emotional, and intellectual energy. And I want to be able to save all that energy for my own creative projects. And the fact that dramaturgy is not something I want to put that kind of energy into intrinsically tells me that it's not really my passion. It's just something that is really helping to bolster my skills so that I can come to film and TV and game design, which are my real passions. I can come to those fields with a stronger sense of story and how to disengage story from the other elements of what would create like a mise-en-scène of a theater piece, an experience, a script, a film, a game, etc. Okay, so having said all of that, those are my reflections on graduate school and what's been going on. For my master's thesis in particular, I have finished reading both Coriolanus and Titus Andronicus, which are the bookend pieces for the Roman tetralogy that Shakespeare has written. If you look at not the order of composition, but the order of chronology, as with regard to how Roman history itself has unfolded. And that's basically all that has happened in the past 6 weeks, which is a little unfortunate, but it just kind of is what it is. My goal is by the end of this week, though, meaning by the end of this Sunday, I will have read all of the plays, all 4 of the plays, and can put together some sort of presentation or synthesis of the material, and like a thing to show my committee when I have to present next week. So by the end of this week, I will have at least finished phase 1 of my master's thesis project, and I will be toggling between my thesis, or thinking about it at least, and my month-long comp exam for my MFA throughout the entirety of December. So that's basically what's happening with that. And the main thing that I've actually discovered at this point is that my original perspective on trying to look at Shakespeare's original intent in writing this tetralogy, and looking at the setup of the Roman history tetralogy in terms of its composition in terms of its order of composition versus its order of chronology, I'm not quite seeing the connections that I thought I would see based on my original theories, which is a little disappointing, but it's also actually pretty liberating, because now that I don't have to take the scholarly perspective on proving, so to speak, that Shakespeare was onto something or trying to do something sneaky with his work, I can now just focus on how I would artistically and creatively turn this entire tetralogy into, say, a film tetralogy or film septology, or even a TV series with interstitial dramaturgical material connecting the points between each single play, which is much more exciting for me. Again, in theory, much more exciting for me than coming up with all this scholarly material that I would need to, prove against literally hundreds of years of people studying Shakespeare and his work. So the development that I was looking for never developed, but it's actually to my benefit as an artist and to what I want to do. So at least by the end of my master's thesis project, I will have some sort of rough draft adaptation material for the Roman history tetralogy. I will have at least done the story analysis and the research and the development of the raw original material, such that I can then take the next step in the future and start developing an actual TV series based on this stuff, which is great. So this will be essentially like a big major chunk of an adaptation protocol, essentially. And speaking of adaptation, I have also decided that not now, but in the spring, I will be working on finishing my hip-hop musical adaptation of Morian the Moor, the first and only Black Knight of the Arthurian Round Table. And I came to that conclusion not because I wanted more work for myself to do, but I had realized that I had not put enough classes on my schedule for next semester in order to graduate, which was really frustrating when I found that out literally about a week ago. But I'm trying to flip that around and turn it into a benefit for me, because the class that I signed up for is the history of musical theater. And as I'm taking that as a grad class, I'm going to try to turn that into a musical writing workshop for myself. So I'll be gaining the history and learning the history of musical theater, which is important if you want to write musicals, which I do. But then I will also be actively working towards the finishing of a rough draft of my very first full-length musical. So it'll be a very interesting homecoming of sorts, because really last spring from January to May, I had basically done the research and worked on and developed the 30-minute version of the Maureen the musical for our King Arthur production. And now around the same time, next year, I will be fleshing that out even more into a full-length musical. And that's really exciting for me. So this is just me trying to turn misfortune, so to speak, into an opportunity for me to increase my portfolio in a way that is beneficial to me. That's how I roll. I just kind of pimp every opportunity. So that is where my thesis and my classes are. For marketing, major news actually, guys. The most recent box set of which I was a part, called Uprising, which is a cyberpunk dystopian box set, just hit 2 best-selling lists on Amazon.com and Amazon.co.uk. It hit the cyberpunk bestsellers list and the science fiction anthology bestsellers list. So for the United Kingdom. So that's actually really exciting. That now means that as an author in total, I have hit 7 distinct Amazon best-selling lists, which is really exciting. 2 of those lists were for science fiction anthology, but one was for the United States and the other was for UK. It does make a difference because it's hard to hit UK best-selling lists, honestly, if you're not aiming specifically for that market. So right now, your girl has bestseller tags in science fiction anthologies, science fiction short stories, cyberpunk, 2 of those lists, and then I forget the other list that I hit. I have a list somewhere around here of all the different distinct lists I've hit, but this has been a relatively successful year for me in terms of upping my author street cred. For other authors who are out there who might be listening to this, hitting an Amazon bestsellers list, if you're more of a veteran and you're more experienced and you have more under your belt, for you might not be that big of a deal. But for me, it is a step in my career in terms of where I started in this process when I published Ghosts of Koa and The Given and the Taken in 2013 around this time versus what's happening in 2018 around this time. And I've just seen my outreach and my network and like my author credibility just really grow over the years. And I'm ready for it to increase in like clout and speed and productivity. I'm ready to do that as an author come 2019. And I think that now that I've had my toe in the field for the past 5 years, it really is time to kick it up a few notches so that I can do even more over the next 5 years. So I'm really actually very happy with where I am as an author. And it's just time to do things a little bit differently and more on a higher level, and I'm ready for that. So I'm super excited as to where I am and where I've come from. Let's see. Marketing. I did some brainstorming and drafting of a marketing checklist for Rebel Ragdoll Productions. And my filmmaking and screenwriting brain has turned back on more so in the past 2 weeks, where I'm thinking more about not only reviewing my filmmaking protocols and adding to them, but also creating marketing schedules, launch schedules, screenwriting schedules. And I've actually started working again on my Sandman feature films, which I will get to in just a second when I get to it. But in terms of marketing, I did do a little work on Rebel Ragdoll Productions this past 6 weeks, which was really great. And I've also been just maintaining my author newsletter for Colby R. Rice, me, at Rebel Ragdoll Press. So Rebel Ragdoll Press and Productions have been getting a little bit of marketing energy, but not too much, but a little bit. Writing hasn't really been getting much energy at all, mostly because I have taken the entire month of November to do a lot of outlining and plotting and streamlining of Hollow Point. As I mentioned in my last couple podcasts, I broke Hollow Point, the mega novel, down into 3 parts. The first part being called Hollow Point Fraternity, which I am trying my best to get out by December 20th. And so for the entirety of November, I have been writing here and there, but mostly I've been actually editing and distilling down that part 1. And in addition to editing part 1, I've been doing a lot of sort of world building and plotting. So there are 5 different characters we're following in Hollow Point, which, as you guys would know at this point, is book 3 of the Books of Ezekiel series that I'm writing. And I am done with the preliminary outlines for 3 of my 5 characters for part 1. And I am working on a deeper level exploration and outline for 2 of my other characters, which are having a little bit of trouble getting some energy and some steam right now. So I'm working on that. For more world building and plotting, I actually sketched out a preliminary plot for book 2 of the Godsman series, which I haven't even released yet. I haven't even released book 1, but book 1 has its own plot, book 2 has its own plot. And actually how I came to that was that, as you guys know, I'm co-writing a novel for an urban fantasy action adventure box set right now that is going to be aiming for the USA Today's bestsellers list as of May or June of 2019. And I'm co-writing this with a partner that I collaborated with in the past. And originally, we were going to write a novel in one of my series, in one of my worlds. And then I just decided not to do that for a variety of reasons, for rights ownership reasons, for being able to use certain plots and certain characters in the future for my own series, etc., etc. So I had to really look at what I wanted out of the co-writing relationship, look at the boundaries, both personal, both emotional, both creative, and also legal boundaries, and really just get to the truth of how I wanted my part of the co-writing relationship to manifest. And so I had spent most of October plotting out our co-written book in my world, in my series, and then I just decided, you know what? I'm not really feeling comfortable with using just my series, and it's not giving us an equitable voice. So I scrapped it and I put all of my ideas back into my series where it belongs. And my co-writing partner and I are now coming up together with a completely original and fresh idea together in a shared world that we're building together with characters and plot that we're developing together. And this feels much more, challenging in a lot of ways because we're under a time crunch and under a time pressure to build a world and characters and a magic system and a plot within the next month, but it also feels a lot more equitable because we both have an equal hand in planning out this series and the first book of that series. So I actually prefer us to be kind of exploring brand new territory on equal playing fields than one of us not having an equal say in developing a new book and a totally new series, etc. So, so my plotting for book 2 of the Godsman actually came out of that learning process of learning how to co-write with a partner. So it wasn't a wasted month. At least I have the first 2 books of that new series plotted out, which is great. And now currently my co-writing partner and I are working on plotting out and brainstorming all these things around the novel that we're co-writing for the USA Today bestselling list leaning anthology. So lots of world building happening, lots of planning and plotting. But the thing with me is that this is great because once plotting is done, the writing is so much easier afterward. So, I took November to do that. I will probably take the rest of this week to finish the plotting for Hollow Point and then just write for the remainder of December until this is done. So I mentioned a little earlier that I'm working on screenwriting, and this is as a result of me sitting more filmmaking classes at my creative uni and listening to more filmmaking podcasts. But when I start to listen to podcasts and sit classes that are in a particular field, all these ideas and passion and energy is generated for projects that are in that particular field. So I've recently resurrected and sort of breathed new life into the Sandman film trilogy that I'm developing. And as I might have mentioned a few podcasts ago, Sandman was supposed to be the debut film in a film trilogy of 3 films around the well, I'm not even going to like tell you guys exactly what it's about. You can just go to the website, but around a particular horror concept. And it's supposed to be a paranormal horror and a psychological horror concept. And then as I was writing Sandman and developing it, I realized that there was a preliminary story that needed to be told prior to Sandman opening. So I stepped back in time and started developing the pre-Sandman story, which in itself turned into an entire script concept on its own. So that particular script is entitled The Monster Between Us, and then Sandman will be now the script and film number 2 in that trilogy called Sandman. The third screenplay is currently untitled. The final centerpiece, or the final, not centerpiece, but the final bookend for that trilogy is currently untitled, but I know exactly what it's going to be about, and I know how I want to tie all the 3 films together. So I've actually, in the past week, have not only restarted working on this film trilogy, and with a particular emphasis on the first film, but I'm also thinking about the last film and the center film, and how they're going to be distinct but very closely linked and related, and work into each other. So it's just, as a side note, it's been my philosophy that the best trilogies are the ones that were originally conceived as trilogies. And at some point, I am going to do a blog series on breaking down like some of the best trilogies ever. And also the trilogies that's, almost were, so to speak. And I have a series of theories on film trilogies and how to make them work really well that I eventually want to get into, which I will probably get into and document as I'm developing my own. So basically, I've been working on that film trilogy, just developing it, and I'm really excited about where that's going. It hasn't completely taken over my current projects, which include just finishing out graduate school and, my comps and my master's thesis phase 1 strong. I do want to do that and focus on that. And then also the other project I'm focusing on is finishing up Hollow Point part 1. But again, as I continue to engage in my creative uni around filmmaking, that part of my brain and my creative repertoire is being activated. And so I can't help but work on that as well. So that's what's been happening. For the Bohemian Badass, I haven't been developing any blog posts or vlogs or podcasts for it. I haven't even touched the website, but I have been working on and honing for particular pieces of material that I do want to make available at thebohemianbadass.com. And actually, these materials are done. And I'm super excited, at least in terms of the first real draft of them that I feel comfortable sending out to people and offering as like a free download on the website. And those materials include 2 workbooks, one of which is what I call a 7-point plotting workbook for screenplays. Okay, developing your screenplay literally from the concept stage all the way to the final, what's the last step in that process, all the way up to each individual beat from beginning to end. And this will be a first this workbook is actually a first step towards a class that I've been working on literally for the past 2 years called Plot Like a Badass. Okay, so this is going to be essentially like the first foray into getting that class off the ground. But to start, the workbook, I have finished it, and it will be available at thebohemianbadass.com probably sometime early next year. But it is done and ready, and I'm actually using that to develop a part of the Sandman trilogy. On the flip side, similar side, I also have created a damn near 200-page workbook for creating really amazing horror screenplays, and that I also will make available online at some point. There are certain parts of it that I do have to take out because some of the material is proprietary and does not belong to me. So some of this material is definitely just for my personal use, but the parts that I can make available to the public, I will. There is a lot of original material that I have developed for this workbook that I've noticed in terms of studying horror films myself that I will make available to you guys at The Bohemian Badass. So both of those workbooks together are like 240 pages together. The horror workbook is 188 pages, and the 7 step screenplay development workbook is over 40 pages. But it's really great. I mean, I'm really proud of myself for being able to hone those things and finally finish them so that they're actually available and they're actual products I'm able to put up on thebohemianbadass.com. And then I've also created a case study guide for horror screenplays that go through at least the first few pages of the horror development workbook with Saw, which is a horror movie, and The Purge, which is another horror movie. So that's going to be available. And the other thing I created was a sequence and beat study guide, which is basically when you're breaking down a film into the 8 sequences, my guide gives you a bunch of different beats to look for in each one of the sequences. It's basically a checklist. Does sequence number 1 have A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Boom. Does sequence number 3 have A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Boom. And so it's not like graphically pretty, but it is complete and useful and wonderful. So those are the 4 main intellectual properties I've developed for the Bohemian Badass over the past 6 weeks that are actually available and ready. And at some point, I will go and redo those guides, not in their content, but just in their presentation, because I really love guides and workbooks that are like pretty and graphically just gorgeous. And so I will be working on actual graphic representations, like really nice graphically designed representations of these workbooks. So a lot going on with that. Even if I am not working on thebohemianbadass.com, I'm always working on material for it. So, just have a little faith in me. Okay, let's move on. Creative Uni. Okay. Oh, and I need to wrap this up because I really need to go and work on this dramaturgical protocol. Creative Uni. So I spent a lot of time, as I told you guys, learning more about directing, filmmaking, producing, and musical theater over the past 6 weeks. Been gathering a lot of materials, a lot of books. I actually just bought a couple books on editing. Let me look here. A book on indie filmmaking written by an Emmy award-winning filmmaker, which is great. A book it's called, hold on, let me just look at this. Directing the Story, Professional Storytelling and Storyboarding Techniques for Live Action and Animation, which is amazing. Like, they're literal graphical representations of how to storyboard your film or your animated film. I have 2 more filmmaking books here that I can't even see by Stephen Katz. I think one is called Film Directing Shot by Shot. Oops. And the other one is called, let me look. Film Directing Cinematic Motion. So I think it's like going to teach me how to take motion shots. I buy so many books, guys. I literally have over 400 books. Actually, probably thinking about it, over 600 books on my list of books to read and to analyze and to just delve into. I love learning, so this is really exciting. And I have even more books coming in this week on music theory and songwriting and music composition for dummies. And on basically like writing better song lyrics, as I'm going to be going into the spring semester and new year, trying to finish my Maureen the musical. I do want to get a foundation in songwriting, music composition, and in writing for musical theater. So I also bought another book called, I think it's literally called Writing Musical Theater by Andrew Cohen. I think it's called. It's like an actual textbook, and I'm really excited to get into it. So lots of stuff going on there. I know I sound like a psychopath at this point, but I don't care because I'm a nerd and I'm proud of it. And let's see. Other parts of my creative uni that are not as, let's say, directed at deliberate study would be me re-exposing myself to stories and things that I really, really enjoy. So I went to see a musical in the past 6 weeks, the Sister Act musical here at U of A. And then I went and started rewatching season 2 of Daredevil, which I really want to do an episode by episode breakdown of the entire series. Because I just think that this series, it's one of my favorite series. And it, alongside Altered Carbon and Scandal and some other series, I think really deserve some individual attention and breakdown from a storytelling and filmmaking perspective. And I would love to turn that into my own personal blog and vlog series. But in the meantime, I'm just like re-exposing myself to those amazing stories and how they're being told, because I'm trying to learn how to do that myself. I also finished Martin Scorsese's Teaches Filmmaking Masterclass. I've also finished Ron Howard's Directing Masterclass. And I've started Spike Lee's Independent Filmmaking Masterclass. And I dipped my toe briefly into Dan Brown's Writing Thrillers Masterclass, but I sort of just want to save that for next year, because I have particular goals with my novel writing and my publishing next year and developing my writing skills. And I think that his class belongs in 2019, along with Judy Bloom's class, Margaret Atwood's class, etc., etc. So lots of learning at masterclass.com. Those are not the only classes I have available, but being that I have a yearly subscription, I like to eat up as many of those classes as possible. And I am also developing like a system for me to learn from all the classes that I take. That system is just about like doing really good note taking and archiving so that I can just have like big, fat, major binders of information that I've gained from all the classes I've sat, all the books I've read, all the history and techniques I've studied, all the podcasts I've listened to, because that's just how serious I am about learning all the craft and the skills of filmmaking and writing and novel writing and marketing, etc. So yeah, I don't even know how I'm still standing, guys, to be honest with you, but I love this stuff, so I can't really help it. I really can't. I also, again, like I said, as I told you guys, restarted listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast. And for those of you who are independent filmmakers, I highly, highly recommend the Indie Film Hustle podcast. It is incredible. Alex Ferrari is doing some amazing things over at indiefilmhustle.com. I will also be signing up for his new streaming service for filmmakers called Indie Film Hustle TV. Because there are a lot of really amazing classes on there and documentaries and insights and interviews that I think are incredible. And because this is a lifelong learning process, I'm just trying to learn as much as I can from as many people and directions as I can. Another sort of quick, shall we say, review I want to give is Ron Howard's directing course at masterclass.com is hands down the best, not only one of the best master classes on masterclass.com, but is definitely the best filmmaking class of all the filmmaking classes that I've taken and am taking at masterclass.com. I can't say enough good things about it. Go check it out. But not only does he give you his philosophy on directing and sort of a tutorial and how-to guide to directing from his perspective, but you also get to see him direct actors, and you learn a lot by watching his directorial process and the ways in which he thinks through things. And he'll actually turn to the camera and break the fourth wall during this process in order to explain to you what he's thinking, why he's staging his characters and his actors in this way, and what you should be thinking about as a filmmaker yourself. It's amazing. He teaches you how to direct, through demonstration, how to direct for POV shots, how to direct for Steadicam, how to direct for, movement, like with character movement and camera movement. He also has a 30-minute essential, like, masterclass, essentially, a masterclass inside of a masterclass on how to stage, block, and direct for low-budget indie films. Which is, that in and of itself makes the class worth it. And then he'll also do, outside of his directorial process, he'll sit and study certain scenes with you, because you're watching them too, and tell you basically the tricks of the trade behind how certain parts of a scene are shot, what kinds of cameras or crews or techniques are being used for each shot that is happening. And it's amazing. He did a breakdown of Raiders of the Lost Ark, and of a chase scene essentially between Indy and the Nazis, and he's chasing them on a horse and all that. You guys remember that iconic, amazing scene from that amazing movie. And he does a 20-minute scene breakdown of this chase scene that really helps you to understand how this scene was filmed in its separate parts, and then how it was edited together to make everything look really seamless. Camera tricks, camera movement, camera movement tricks, all these things. It's just, the class is just incredible. It blew me away, and I would highly recommend that as a really wonderful filmmaking 101 for those of you who really do want to direct, and who also want to storyboard and stage your own and block your own films. Just putting that out there, okay? Love that class. I cannot say enough about that class. That's all I'll say. Moving on. Okay, so let's see. I worked a little bit on the Rebel Ragdoll business and brand as a whole, just managing things administratively behind the scenes. A friend and I came up with an idea for yet another YouTube vlog series called Colby versus Literature, which we think is going to be really awesome if it ever gets off the ground, because you guys know I have all these projects that are just like on my slate that I just really want to do, and not nearly enough time. It is what it is. And then for the rest of this, I just basically took care of myself as much as possible. You guys know how big I am on self-care, and that was actually a major theme for the past 6 weeks. There are a lot of things that have been happening outside of graduate school, outside of teaching, and even outside of my creativity and my business life that have really helped me to grow and develop as a person on a personal level. And the lesson that I've taken from all these different experiences is that you have to love yourself and put yourself first and your needs first. And it's not about being selfish. It's about engaging in self-care. And so when I recorded this podcast about a week ago, I hadn't come to some conclusions that I am coming to today, which are the ones I just expressed to you. But I just keep coming back to the idea personally that if it's not serving to increase your bottom line, to increase the love and happiness in your life, or to help you achieve your goal as a business person, as an artist, etc., then it's probably, or if it's not contributing to your self-care, all right, I'll put that there too. Then whatever that thing is, if it's not doing one of those 4 things, it's probably a waste of time. And just by that mantra, I have been able to cut out a lot of things that were not serving me in all aspects of my life, but especially in my personal life, and really help to take all that energy that was in those things that weren't serving me and really refocus that on the things that I really love. And this is not to say that life should always only and always be about you, but investment in yourself is really the only secure ROI that you will ever have. If you invest in working hard in graduate school, the ROI is that you get an advanced degree. When you invest in your writing and you invest in, finishing books, the ROI is that your back library or your backlist of books as an author increases. When you invest in yourself as a filmmaker, as a game designer, as an artist in general, when you invest in your fitness and in your health and you're paying attention to your exercise and your diet, the ROI on that is that you have a healthier body and a nicer looking body and a body that will support you for a much longer time throughout your life. So an investment in yourself, for the most part, generally is always going to give you a really good return. An investment in other things and shifty people and shifty situations, the return on that is going to be kind of shaky. And there are instances where taking a risk in those areas is definitely worth it. But the moment you start realizing that your investments are going to be giving you a long-term deficit, you need to be leaving that situation, whatever it is. And so that is a major lesson that I've learned over the past 6 weeks, or that I've relearned and I'm reapplying to what it is I want to do as a person, as an artist, as a mom. Same thing actually on the line of being a parent. When you really hardcore invest in your children, usually, not always, but usually you get a great return on investment, especially when they're little. As they get older and they start doing their own thing and having their own mind, things start to get a little bit more shaky. But if you invest in providing a really good foundation and put your energy and heart and soul into your kids in a healthy way for like the first 10 to 14 years of their lives, 10 to 13 years of their lives, you'll pretty much have a pretty good result, unless like your child has like, a psychological shortcoming in terms of like they have narcissistic personality disorder or something that you can't really control, So I guess the lesson I want to leave with you guys now before I go eat lunch and then work on my graduate school stuff is that as you're growing as an artist, just keep investing and reinvesting in yourself, in your dream, in your goals, and in your learning and knowledge. Also in your practice. And really put up boundaries. Let yourself know what you will put up with from people and situations and what you will not. Try to figure out what's serving you and what's not, and then act on it and move forward. And I swear to you, after days, months, weeks, years of doing this, you will see a return on investment. I know I'm seeing a return on investment. God willing, as of about 6 months from now, my return on my investment in myself in the past 3 years will have me looking at my third degree, my second master's degree rather, will have me looking at a whole nother bunch of books that I've published, will have me looking at a couple of screenplays that are finished, will have me looking at, me building up my business even more, including the Bohemian Badass. And so, yeah. And will also have me looking at, God willing, yet another, half year of putting effort and time and love into my little one, which is yielding such wonderful results because she's amazing. So anyway, I don't want to ramble on too long. You guys get the point. I'm going to go eat. I am hungry. As you can see, I'm a little tired up in here. But I am looking forward to the end of the semester. I will be back next week because my crazy week will have mostly passed by next Monday, like my little crazy time. And I will have gotten a little bit more rest. But I will be, from here on in, giving you guys updates on what's happening for the rest of the year. I'm working on Hollow Point in addition to my graduate school stuff. I'll keep working on that. And then, of course, at the end of the month in December, I will be doing not only the quadrimesterly roundup of everything that I've done from August of this year to the end of December, but I'll be doing my yearly roundup of the entire year of creative achievements and milestones. And then I'll be doing my 2019 goals and hopes and dreams and all that, as I usually do at the end of every single year. So I love the end of the year. I love the new year. It's my favorite part of the year, even though I'm dead tired. But I will be back and on point. And thank you guys so much for just sticking with me, for being patient. And, even for those of you who just listen to get inspiration, or listen, to just support and to feel like you're in the trenches with somebody. I really appreciate being in the trenches with you, even if I can't see you or I don't know that you're there. And I hope you'll continue to really bust ass and kick ass all the way to your creative goals, no matter what they are. So with that in mind, okay, keep writing, keep creating, keep it indie, and I will talk to you guys next week. Mwah. Bye. Hey boos, I recorded a 55 plus minute podcast just to realize that I completely forgot to talk about Thanksgiving and the fact that I am extremely grateful and happy to just be alive. I was like, wait, there's something missing. So before I get into the actual podcast, and you'll see my horrible editing, which is okay. I just wanted to wish you guys a belated happy Thanksgiving. And also, as you guys know, it was this past Thursday on the 22nd. And I just wanted to just come on really quickly and just list out my gratitudes. And these are something that my daughter and I pray on every night. I'm not particularly religious, but I am spiritual. And I do think it's important to take out a moment to connect with one's higher power or even higher self. And if you don't believe in any of that, I hope that at the very least you believe in a higher self of you, because you're never at a stage where you're perfect and done, developing yourself. So I hope that we're always reaching for something that is out of our reach, and that we're always trying to strive and humble ourselves in the face of our own imperfections and in the face of our own journeys. Anyway, I just wanted to say to you guys again, happy Thanksgiving. And what am I grateful for? Everything. My health, for one. There are 3 artists that I have recently, literally over the holiday season, have heard about in terms of fighting cancer. Unfortunately, one of them, as you guys might know if you're in the indie author space, Brandon Barr, who's an amazing fantasy author, unfortunately just passed away literally the day before Thanksgiving. And it was very sad, and he's done some amazing work. And then there's another author, and I'm not putting people's business out there. This is well known within the author community. Another author is also fighting cancer right now, and I'm not sure what the odds are. But this is also an author I really love and respect. I love her work. I see my voice reflected in her work, and she has some amazing stories to tell. And I just hope that, I'm putting out all my love out there. And then there's another artist who was a musical theater teacher at the U of A who unfortunately just went into hospice. So I say this not to put people's business out there, but to say that one of the primary things I'm grateful for is, at the moment, I am relatively in good physical health. And that can be a huge major factor in terms of how much you're able to get done and what you're able to get done on a day-to-day basis, but also in your life. So majorly thankful for that. Grateful for the fact that I am of sound mind and body, that I'm in my right mind in terms of being able to come to the computer and create art and, do all the things that I love to do. I'm grateful for just the basics: shelter, water, clothes, shoes. These things feel really basic, but imagine actually going a week without any of these things, and trust me, you'll be a lot more grateful. And so I try to give gratitude for that every night. And of course, for my little girl, who's amazing and who's a blessing every single day. And so I just want to encourage you guys to really sit back and reflect, not just on Thanksgiving, but just every single day on maybe 3 things that you guys are grateful for. It really gives me a lot of joy, and it makes me feel really happy to be alive and well. And no matter what's happening in life, even when things are really hard, I can look at my list of gratitudes and be like, you know what? I'm doing okay. This day is really crappy, but it's going to be okay because these wonderful things I have going on in my life, I couldn't literally live without.